So David, you're an alumni of the Western Governors Leadership Institute. You're a delegate from New Mexico, and you were a graduate of the first leadership forum of Wiggly. What have you been doing since? That was 2 years ago. That was 2022.
Yes, indeed I was. You know, actually, when I was a Wiggly delegate, I was working for the New Mexico legislature, proposing policy priorities and budget recommendations for our judicial system. Since then, I have transitioned to the nonprofit sector, and I work for the New Mexico Association of Realtors, and I do their government affairs and lobbying.
Right. And did your experience at Wiggly have any influence on that transition or in your profession now?
Oh, absolutely. I would say that, you know, the bipartisanship that we hear so much about here within Wiggly and within WGA definitely influenced my decision to go toward, you know, housing policy. Housing policy is very bipartisan in nature. Everyone wants to be housed. Everyone wants everyone else to be housed. So that definitely influenced my way of thinking.
Yeah. Have you had a chance to visit with the current crop of leadership forum delegates?
Absolutely. I think I have met all of them except for two, and I'm going to try to check them off my list today.
Great. What do you think?
A great group of individuals. I mean, we have a great delegate from New Mexico this year, Mr. Isaiah, and you know, everyone comes from a very different, unique perspective within, you know, their degree programs and, you know, the occupations that they occupy. So great group.
Great. David, tell us a little bit about your experience at the Leadership Forum this week.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Leadership Forum, I was able to see this year's delegates interact with, you know, former governors and, you know, industry leaders, and that was my favorite part of my Wiggly experience. You know, it's not every day that you get to interact with these types of people, and so seeing them ask very informative questions, thinking about our future, it was just really inspiring from my perspective.
Great. Thanks. And what are you doing, Isaiah, when you're not coming to Wiggly forums?
You know, currently I'm kind of doing 50-50 of something of going to grad school at the University of New Mexico and also working as a fiscal analyst for the state legislature for the finance committee. It's both have been rewarding experiences, but I have to tell you that I'm very tired all the time, so coffee kind of keeps me going.
Yeah. So you're in the current cohort, the 2024 cohort of the Western Governors Leadership Institute. Talk about your experience here this week in Lake Tahoe.
Man, the experience has been great. Obviously, we're in just a beautiful location in Northern California, which I'm very thankful to be here, surrounded by just very bright and intelligent individuals. I was able to speak to a delegate from Wyoming who was elected as the youngest state rep in his state, which is super inspiring and something that I could relay to my colleagues back at home of saying, hey, it should never matter about your age or other considerations for running for office. So I really value the experience in these conversations I'm having with all the other delegates.
Have you had any conversations with governors or former governors or members of the sponsor community of the Western Governors Association?
You know, I'm looking forward to talking to our governor today. She is definitely a trailblazer, and I can't wait to have more conversations about what's going on in New Mexico and how we can improve on certain policy topic areas in our state. I was able to ask a lot of questions to the former governor of Hawaii, former governor of Utah, where they were able to give me some insightful thoughts about citizen legislatures, how to diversify our economy. So they were really insightful, and I was able to take notes, and hopefully we get to implement them in New Mexico pretty soon.
You had really some pretty intense conversations with 6 governors and Judy Woodruff yesterday, and they imparted a lot of, I thought, pretty thoughtful leadership lessons. Can you mention 1 or 2 takeaways from those conversations?
Well, I think Governor Mead had probably one of the, I think something that was really beneficial for me was the 4 C's, which it was constituency, the Constitution. Oh man, they're blanking for me right now. But I think the one that I really liked the most out of the 4 C's was compassion, because I believe in public service you have to have compassion for others through a bipartisan manner. And without that, we're never going to be able to get stuff done in the United States.
David, you're in the first class, and you've been loitering here around in the current class. The program's evolved quite a bit.
Absolutely.
What do we do? What do we have to do to improve it?
I think continue doing what you're doing. I mean, I definitely have seen some changes from from my cohort and now this year's cohort, and I think it's making the program so much better. Recruiting individuals from more states is fantastic, and seeing a lot more representation from across the West.
Isaiah, you mentioned running for office. Is that something you're interested in doing?
My first experience running for an office is actually for the Graduate Professional Student Association, which my colleague here actually was the president at the University of New Mexico at the time, and he encouraged me to go for it. And unfortunately, I didn't win because I wasn't able to get the law student constituency, but potentially in the future I would, and the only reason why is to make an impact, because I know in any public office at the local, the state, or the federal level, it has an immense impact on your community, and that's always what I wanted, is to just help my community out.
It does. I think that's indisputable, but I think there's also evidence, at least a lot of anecdotal evidence, that people of your generation are probably not really turned on by, I don't want to say public service, but elective office for sure. Is that your impression, and how do you feel about that?
That is my impression. I think just being around just like-minded individuals here who are sharing their experiences, it really opens your eyes on what the reality is of holding a public office. There's a lot of scrutiny, a lot of negative comments imposed on these individuals, which is essentially not fair, because regardless of what their party affiliation is, they're trying to do good in their community. But that scrutiny and that just hatred that we're seeing currently in the United States is something that could potentially turn away really great, young, bright leaders like myself who have those doubts.
Yeah. What do you think, Deb?
I agree with those sentiments. I think a little bit of what we heard from former governors yesterday was that, we need to talk. We need to sit down and, have those tough conversations. But at the end of the day, we need to get along with each other. We need to respect one another. And I think that's huge. And then I think going back to the question that you asked, Isaiah, if he sees himself running for office, he's definitely a future leader of New Mexico. I definitely foresee him running and being very successful.
Oh, that's great. And Isaiah, are you going to encourage David to run for governor?
I've already told David he's definitely going to put it off for a while, but we're always going to encourage him to do it, because honestly, there is a very small population in New Mexico, and there's a very finite group of individuals who have like the courage and the intrinsic motivation of really trying to change New Mexico. Because New Mexico, obviously, we could both attest to this, has a lot of struggles in a lot of these major policy areas, and we need really good leaders to step up to the plate to really be on the forefront of making change.
How do we do that? I mean, how do we inspire? Because you mentioned how important it is that those public service positions, and you've affirmed that the people in your generation aren't really interested. So are we in crisis mode, and what do we need to do to really inspire that next generation?
For me personally, what drives me is my love for my community and what New Mexico has given to me. So I feel that there's a motivation within me where I have to give back to my community for everything they gave to me, because my life starting off wasn't very easy, and everyone has their trials and tribulations. But what I could say is that overcoming those just hardships in my life has made me realize how thankful I am for my family and for the state of New Mexico for everything they offered me.
Yeah. And on that question, I think programs like this are exactly what we need to encourage young individuals to see what's out there, what the opportunities are. In chatting with some of the delegates from this year, they all a little bit of them talked about imposter syndrome. And I think one of the biggest pieces of advice is everyone is at a different part of their journey. Everyone has a really great background, and those backgrounds create good public servants. So I think programs like this are so crucial for getting individuals involved and allowing them to know what opportunities are out there.
Where do you guys get your information, your news?
Well, I was talking to some of the individuals here in this room today about what my news source is, and unfortunately some people could say it's kind of bad, but my newspaper is Twitter, X, where I'm able to follow all the accounts that I want from across platforms and get the same information, maybe different takes, but I believe that's like the central hub of where I get my information, because we talked about local newspapers yesterday and how that's kind of a dying breed, but there's still a lot of publication from independent journalists around the world that are giving the same information. Unfortunately, it may not be what it once was, but I feel I still get the same information that I need for my job and just to also be informed about what's going on in the world.
How about you, David?
For me, as a government affairs professional, I do a little bit of everything from watching news, reading newspapers, blog posts, you name it. So I try to stay up to date on all social media outlets as well.
So you and me, you're the other person who reads newspapers.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I can't even find a newspaper at the airport anymore. I mean, I find it tragic, actually.
Yeah.
And I guess I bring that up because you talked about the disinterest of your generation in elective office, and my impression is a lot of that is due to social media and kind of it can be a really toxic environment. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's very clickbaity. There's a lot of, because for me personally, I love hearing people like politicians on social media giving out what their policy solutions and issues are, what they're trying to achieve. But I just see a lot of just hatred and a lot of just negative words being imposed on these individuals that is maybe not really deserving of, because a lot of these individuals do a lot of bipartisan work, like we were talking about during the first day of the Institute. So it is unfortunate that there's a lot of hatred, and which is why a lot of individuals are maybe like, I don't want to run for a local precinct chair or be in city council because of the ridicule they would have on a platform that's not even real.
Tell me a little bit more about your nonprofit.
Absolutely. So the New Mexico Association of Realtors, we represent nearly 8,000 Realtor members in New Mexico. We have members doing business and living in every county of the state. And so we have a really great advocacy network of our members who are on the ground, selling houses, representing both buyers and sellers in the residential and commercial real estate space. And our association provides the tools and resources necessary for them to do their job. In specific, in the advocacy space, we work on housing policy, we work on private property rights, home ownership, and property ownership for all.
That sounds like a great potential sponsor for the Western Governors Leadership Institute. Don't you
I'll
think?
get working right on it. Yeah, exactly.
You think you'll do this for a while? Where do you see yourself in 10 or 20 years?
I really am enjoying the government affairs space. Elective office is maybe in my future. We'll see where that leads. Really just trying to get some good experience to kind of guide me in my journey.
We talk about the toxicity of politics, and we certainly see that in Washington, D.C. What's it like in New Mexico? Do you find it a pretty partisan place, or is it pretty cooperative politically? What's the vibe?
From my perspective, I work at the Legislative Finance Committee, where we pride ourselves on nonpartisan work and doing real policy analysis and giving budget recommendations that are fiscally responsible. So I believe getting that perspective has helped me become a better just individual overall, of just like understanding like the issues and just kind of understanding what's going on in the state of New Mexico. We have a lot of issues in our state and we need to get them resolved. But I think the one thing that's very encouraging is the bipartisanship that we have within our legislature. We have a supermajority currently, but we have a lot of Republicans and moderate Democrats and liberal Democrats working all together to really achieve some really great policy outcomes. And we saw this last year. Unfortunately, the paid medical family leave bill wasn't able to make the finish line, but there was a lot of other legislation that had a lot of bipartisan support, which the governor of New Mexico was able to sign, and we're going to be able to implement it pretty soon.
How can the Leadership Institute, David, keep alumni like yourself and Isaiah involved in our operations?
Oh, great question. I think the Alumni Network, it was thrilled with the opportunity to be a part of a delegation in either 22, 23, or now 24. And I think all of us are more than excited to, support in any way that we can, whether it be, in recruiting candidates for the current cohort or, providing, networking opportunities, things like that. I can definitely say with 100% assurance that all of the former delegates are more than willing to help in whatever way. So lean on us, engage us.
Well, we'll definitely lean on you to generate applications for next year's program. All right, that's good.
And just to add to that, David actually is the one who facilitated this for me and informed me about this program which I was really thankful for because he saw me as someone who could really be beneficial for something like this. And I'm actually already in the process of telling my friend to step up to the plate and submit an application to be a part of this, because I believe that New Mexico doesn't necessarily have the representation on the federal level as we should, and places like this can allow us to have a platform to share what these issues are, and to also get leaders like ourselves to really just be immersed in this, because there's just so many intelligent people who are here, and it's a valuable experience.
Yeah, well, thank you for paying it forward. I think that's what the foundation is all about paying it forward. And the governors, the former governors, you talked to 6 former governors yesterday. I think you're the reason that they're here, because they've kind of done their duty. They're in or nearing retirement, and they care a lot, and you're the future, and they want to encourage you and help you. So lean on us as well.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Let me ask you this: do y'all think it's time for a Westerner to be in the White House? And just for further context, the answer is yes, but
Absolutely,
go ahead and explain why.
Absolutely. I think, the Western states, we have very similar experiences, and, we're a different breed here in the West, and I definitely think, someone with that mindset should be in the White House.
Yeah. What do you think?
Well, obviously there's some individuals who are here that have aspirations, maybe potentially in the future, to be a vice president or even a presidential nominee in the future. So that's very encouraging, because I feel there are a lot of issues in the West that don't really get discussed on the national level. I'm starting to learn more about conservation here, water rights, just issues that are really just to the heart to a lot of individuals on the western side of the United States. So yeah, we definitely need some representation when it comes there.
And on that point, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this fact. Constantly in New Mexico, we tell people, "Oh, we're from New Mexico," and they say, "Oh, Mexico, that's not a part of the United States." We get that pretty frequently. So, that representation is so important from all Western states. As sometimes we might feel like we're left out.
Yeah, I'm from Arizona, and John McCain used to say, Arizona is the only state where their mothers don't tell their children they can grow up to be president, right? Because they had so many nominees, including him. But yeah, Westerners don't really have a lot of traction when they run for president. We've had several who've tried. Why? What's the reluctance of the country to listen?
Well, I think one of the things that stood out to me, I was only 8 years old at the time, but when Senator Mitt Romney was running to become the next president, that was probably the first instance I'm like, oh, he's from Utah. That's very unorthodox, maybe. That's maybe a little different, but he is a very intelligent, although there's some views that some individuals may disagree on, he really promotes bipartisanship. Unfortunately, he had to run against probably one of the most historical presidential nominee candidates that we had in the last 40 years. So, individuals like that who have the commonality of just promoting bipartisanship is important, and it's valuable. But we have a lot of good candidates for sure.
Yeah, and I agree, and I would submit that we've had a number of members of the Western Governors Association who would be excellent presidents, and I would also argue that their shortcoming electorally is that they were bipartisan. That a lot of the country seems to have an appetite for fighting, and the governors are really more focused on getting things done.
Yeah.
And to that point, I just wanted to add, when you were bringing up Senator McCain, I remember when he actually had to vote against a bill regarding the Affordable Care Act, which was actually showing an act of bipartisanship, which he was actually really criticized at the moment for doing that and not meeting with leadership within the Republican Party in the Senate. So that's a real act of courage, and I feel like when you promote bipartisanship in this state currently, where we're at, it's just not really an appetite for some people.
Right.
And I think yesterday we talked a little bit about social media and how you can get caught in the algorithm and only see things that support your viewpoint.
Right.
And so having those conversations and talking with individuals with different viewpoints, it should be so respected to help us get to that bipartisan manner. And so I think social media might have something to do with it. Many factors.
Yeah, the phenomenon of bias confirmation, right? And I think that's a really, really big issue. What distinguishes Western governors really is this commitment to bipartisanship, and that's a real thing. And you've seen it, and you'll see it over the next 2 days. When people who think that bipartisanship is dead have never been to a WGA meeting, and it's so evident, so manifest. But we've been talking about the limitations of bipartisanship, and particularly with the electoral battles, and it's the people on both sides of the political spectrum seem to be screaming the loudest. How do we elevate this notion of bipartisanship? We're saying it's great. How do we communicate that to the rest of the country?
From my perspective, I think we can lean back on how we're raised as Westerners, and the hard work and determination and the need to work with others. Kind of leaning back on those original principles, and saying if we want to get stuff done, we have to talk about it. We have to talk about the really important issues that maybe the left or the right wants to take on. But we can all do it together, and I think that's a really important conversation. It's going to be a mindset change for all generations, really. And through elected office, we have to support that decision to work together from all parties, really.
And just to add to that, I think what it takes is leading with love and compassion, and I think really just promoting that we're doing this for people.
Yeah.
Like, government is intended to serve the people, and I think we kind of misconstrue that a little bit. I believe that everything that the state of New Mexico does is for a specific type of person. If it's someone with developmental disabilities, if it's someone who is unhoused, if it's someone who is on welfare, or whatever the case may be, we want to help across the board. And I think that sometimes gets lost because there's these huge policy areas, but we always get in fights about the little minutia things within legislation or within just like debates and stuff like that. So I believe it's just leading with love and compassion. That's something that we need to instill in our communities to really promote that. It's like, hey, it's not about who the winner or loser is. It's about achieving a like-minded goal, even if it's a compromise, which is another bad word. We still have to do something. If we don't do it, it's going to be the status quo, which currently right now, it's not a good thing.
Does your generation care?
Well, I care, and I make people care, because I beat on the drum every day. I'm very passionate, and I wanted to be in education at first because I felt that's where I can make a real impact. But after getting more experience and getting my first opportunity at the city level with my local mayor, it made me realize that you can do it. It's just really urging people and knocking on the doors and saying, hey, don't give up, because there is still hope. Although we are a divided nation currently, we still have the opportunity to really come together, because there is going to be a point, like in COVID, where we are going to have to come together and work together to achieve a solution where it's going to save a lot of people's lives, or potentially, just make our state a better state in general.
Yeah. And I think deep down everyone cares. I think deep down everyone really wants to work together and make the world a better place. But it is the change of mindset and the status quo of the way a lot of people are currently thinking in the nation.
Yeah, but what about politics? I mean, do they care about politics?
Yeah, I think everybody cares about politics now. I think you mentioned something yesterday where it was like people are more politically aware than ever because we have so much access to information. So I think people are very just aware of what's going on. I believe it's just like it's easier to have negative comments towards something instead of like being positive about something. So I think that's where the disconnect is.
Right. Governor Mead once told me that candidates now for office, say for Congress especially, what they're promising to do, they say, I'm going to fight for you, I'm going to fight for you, I'm going to fight for you. And what they're promising to do is to go back to Washington and fight. They're not promising to solve problems. And they deliver on their promise. They go back and they fight and not get a lot done.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I have to say that Western governors, or governors in general, actually probably achieve the most than on the federal level. And I think that was reiterated so much yesterday is that our government was able to pass like 60 pieces of legislation within a 30-day session. That's outstanding.
Yeah.
And although legislation doesn't mean that it's going to act some changes because you have to have individuals that implement it, but that's getting to work. That's getting in the nitty-gritty of what matters, and going through the budget appropriation process and getting funding to things that we need in our community. So I think governors get stuff done. And you could say I was an intern in Congress for a summer, and I could see just how chaotic it is and how hard it is to actually get stuff across the finish line. The only thing that we could agree on a bipartisan level was banning TikTok, which is like the most just absurd thing that we could agree on a bipartisan level. So, just stuff like that where it's really encouraging what our states are doing.
Well, I can tell you that there is no other group of elected officials who, at their level of influence, are producing policy that is as substantive, as important, as meaningful as the Western governors. You've met several former governors anyway. Who did you particularly enjoy yesterday?
Whew, that's a hard one. I believe that Governor Mead is someone that I just really you could just feel his aura of that. Yeah. That's what a leader is. Regardless of the politics and stuff, or whatever the case may be, he really was just he has those characteristics, he has that aura, and that's what you need. And that's what I think individuals sometimes lack in, is having that presence of now that guy is someone I could stand with and support.
Right. That's great.
And from my perspective, Governor Bullock is amazing. During my year as a Wiggly delegate, we connected, and now that I'm back, I revisited with him and connected back on our experience, and just a great public servant, and great energy, and that's what we need in politics.
Well, the two members you named are members of the foundation board. I just met with them both, and they were speaking very highly of you as well. So,
well, good. Hopefully.
Good.